There we go. And we're very pleased today to have Norm Horner with us as part of our project. Thank you, Norm, for participating. Truly appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Dave.
And what we typically do here, Norm, is we always ask the same questions of everyone that we interview.
Yes.
And we begin by asking for contextual reasons, just a little bit of background about yourself. So we'll
Okay.
start out with, where were your parents born?
My father was born in Chaville, Quebec, in the Ottawa Valley, about 80 kilometers northwest from Ottawa. My mom was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I was born in Montreal, Quebec, at the Catherine Booth Hospital on August 30th, 1950.
Okay. And where did you receive your education? Elementary, secondary, and any post-secondary?
Yes. So elementary was divided between all PSBGM schools, Meadowbrook and Lachine. Then we moved to Pierrefonds, and as the area was growing, my sisters and I attended a different school every year. I graduated from West Park School in Dollar des Ormeaux and graduated from Riverdale High School in 1967. Second graduating class.
Okay. And what was your occupation?
I was a teacher, and the last 10 years of my career, I taught history at Lindsay Place High School in the Lester B. Pearson School Board. But I began my teaching career in 1973 at Royal Arthur School in Little Burgundy, and then taught at Guy Drummond School in Outremont. And then my last year at PSBGM was Lawrence School in Point St. Charles. And of course, with the Montreal Anglo population falling around 1984, I was transferred to what was then the Lakeshore School Board. So I taught elementary school at Beacon Hill School in Beaconsfield until I moved to Lindsay Place, where I ended my career in 2007. But after that, I taught from 2008. And then from 2009 to 2015, I taught at the McGill Faculty of Education, taught student teachers, and supervised student teachers when they were out in the schools, learning their craft.
Okay. And as a matter of record, where do you live now?
My wife and I live in Point Claire, Quebec.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to get to what I call the meat of the matter here.
Yes.
There are questions concerning your experience living in the Quebec of today.
Yes.
So we'll start out by asking you, what is the best thing in your mind about living in Quebec?
I looked at that question. For me, it's the land and everything that goes with the land, traveling through the land, the villages, the cities, the rivers, the national parks. I identify Quebec for me, as the land.
Okay. Now, the next question, a lot of people have had trouble with it. And certainly if it was posed to me, I would have trouble with it.
Yes.
And, but I would ask you to respond as the question is posed. However, you're free to elaborate on that response in any way you see fit. So having said that, describe your relationship to Quebec in a single word.
Oh, that's really tough. I'm sorry. That's really a tough one. And I saw the question and I beforehand, and I couldn't think of an answer then. Boy, I want to say fond, because I've always been very fond of Quebec. I've always been very proud of much of Quebec, but those feelings are more mixed now. Oh, that's a tough one, Dave. In one word, let's say fond.
Okay, fair enough. And where do you feel most at home in Quebec? For example, in communities based on language, culture, profession, or geographic location?
Okay, I have to say it's based on geographic location. I'm thinking of the west end of Montreal, the West Island, and certainly my ancestral home up in Chaville, Quebec. I still have cousins living up there, and I get up there once or twice a year. And when I'm walking down Main Street in Shawville or out visiting a cousin at their cottage, I feel very at home.
Okay. Now, the next question, again, people have said to me, well, it's a two-part question, and the
Yes.
second part is about the official definition in Quebec.
Yes.
People said to me, Dave, what do you mean by official? And what I mean is, it's your perception of official.
Yes.
It could be based on what the Quebec government's idea is, what the media says it is, the Canadian government, your peers,
Yes.
whatever you perceive to be the official definition of Quebec. So having said that,
yes,
I'll ask a two-part question.
Okay.
How would you define a Quebecer? And do you think the official definition in Quebec includes you?
I think a Quebecer is someone who identifies with being a citizen here in Quebec. So in other words, you might think of yourself as a Canadian citizen, but are you a Canadian citizen in Quebec? I identify myself as a Canadian citizen who has spent a lifetime in Quebec, who I also identifies as a Quebec citizen. And the second part
is, do you think the official definition in Quebec includes you?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do feel that it includes me.
Okay, very good.
Very much so. And
has your sense of identity as a Quebecer changed over the years? And if so,
yes.
in what ways?
Okay, so here's a little example. It's June 1969. I'm 18 years old. I'm at the Toronto Pop Festival. I'm at the edge of the stage taking pictures of all the performers. The second to last performer that night was Robert Charlebois. And Toronto didn't get Robert Charlebois. They almost booed him off the stage. And I got him. I understood completely so I just wanted to walk out of Varsity Stadium right then and there and get in my car and drive back home to my territory, which was Quebec. And I had this strong sort of, and as a teenager, I had actually, unlike a lot of my Anglo friends, I'll be honest, I developed a sort of a certain affinity for Quebec. And I felt myself, remember, it's at the time of the civil rights struggles, and I kind of identified a lot of the things that Francophones were saying. I mean, there was never a problem with lunch counters or segregated schools, but I sometimes felt that Francophone Quebecers were getting the short end of the stick, and I kind of identified with their need for recognition. And so that that was part of my life for a long time. I never came out advocating either for sovereignty. I really was glad when those two referendums failed. I did disagree often, and Jim Wilson will tell you this, with some of the educational provisions of Bill 101. For instance, I strongly felt that if you're coming here from Egypt, Iran, non-Anglophone countries, that yes, it did make sense that those children should go to French schools as a way of becoming bilingual and taking their place in Quebec. So I was very liberal for the longest time. However, the current government has really turned me off, because what they've done is, I feel, I'm sure you're familiar with the term, the tyranny of democracy. Legault has found the sweet spot. He knows there's no taste for another referendum, but at the same time, he knows he can do a lot of things with impunity, because he will be, unless there's some kind of incredible scandal, he will be in office, I think, as long as he wants to be. And you know what they say in the States now, you can get rid of Trump, but you can't get rid of Trumpism. Well, you can get rid of Legault, but I think Legaultism will always be, in my lifetime, I think it will be part of the scene. So I find that my positive identification with Francophone Quebec has been eroded in the last decade, I would say.
Okay, now we're going to just take a pause here, because it's something I didn't mention at the top.
Yes, right.
As this is for educational purposes.
Yes.
I am not going to comment on your responses. If you're
Fair enough. Yeah.
I want to. Many people
Okay.
have interviewed. I wanted to say a lot, but because of what it's for, I can't.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I will not,
Understood.
yeah, and I will not be asking follow-up questions. The
Okay.
questions and the responses are the star of this proposition.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So if you see me nodding, it means I want to say something, but I won't. Okay.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's not that I disagree with you.
No, no.
Most certainly do. But anyway.
Okay.
Okay. Now, having said all of that, what are the most difficult things about living in Quebec?
Okay. I think that I feel there's a growing intolerance, and I'll give you one example of it. You could have this hypothetical situation where three guys walk into a bar. They're an Iranian, a Portuguese guy, and an Egyptian guy, and they're speaking in French, and they're talking about how well their kids are doing at French schools, and they're going to French CEGEP in the next couple of years. And then they go home, and in their homes, they speak Arabic and Farsi and Portuguese. And I think that this government has manipulated that to say, you see, we have to protect people are speaking at home in languages other than French, and we have to come down even harder. When I feel a lot of the objectives, at least in the education realm of Bill 101, have been met. And that bothers me. This sort of and they will use that to in spite of the fact that Montreal supposedly is one of the leading trilingual cities in the world, in spite of that, they will manipulate public opinion to solidify their rationales for harder positions, such as what Bill 96 is. So that bothers me a great deal. And there's still sympathy in my heart for the protection of the French language, but I feel now that they turned it, and it's almost like creating an us and them kind of situation, especially with immigrants. So that's how I feel about that.
Okay. Now, in recent years, some members of Quebec's Francophone majority have identified a number of linguistic and cultural threats. Which of these concerns do you share and support, and which of these concerns make you feel excluded or targeted?
Yes. I certainly, the broad-based need to protect French and to promote it in the workplace certainly has my support. I think, however, regulations in Bill 96 show that there's almost a darker side to it, that there's a certain repressive attitude, and that does not have my support at all. I feel badly for the Quebec Liberal Party because on the one hand, they know that they have to support laws and measures that protect French in the workplace and in schools, but at the same time, they're caught, and this has marginalized them, unfortunately. And I think that another factor is some of the big. I'm very, very concerned about immigration. I mean, there's all kinds of concerns related to it, such as adequate housing. If we want people to arrive here, they have to have somewhere to live, and obviously at a cost that somebody working in a hospital, for instance, can afford. But I think that we're, because of the fear that the Legault government has about non-Francophone immigrants coming into Quebec, it's just cutting off the flow of immigrants that we need in the next 20 years. So I don't know if I answered that fully. Yeah, okay.
Now, what is the biggest problem? You've alluded to it already, I
Yes.
think, some of your
Yeah.
responses, but I'm going to ask the question for the record anyway.
Yes, sure.
What is the biggest problem facing Quebec, and how, in your mind, do you think it could be resolved?
I think the biggest problem now is immigration and the encouragement of immigration to keep Quebec society vital, to provide services that we're going to need to keep our economy running smoothly. Even and I'm not just talking about unskilled labor. I'm talking here about highly specialized people. For instance, our gaming industry, which is huge. And if we can't attract people to that, and we do it with laws, but we also do it with perceptions that people have about this place called Quebec. Is that a place where I want to live? When I know I can go to all these other places and have a good life. You know, I think people who do come here and settle here enjoy life in Quebec. There's certainly so many aspects that are to enjoy, but I'm very concerned about our ability in the next few years to attract the immigrants that we need to maintain a good standard. And I'm not talking just economically, just a good standard of living, our hospitals, our workplaces, our schools. We need to, because of the demographic demands, we need to bring those people to Quebec. I mean, there's so many other things. I mean, there's all kinds of environmental issues that other regions share, but I think this is particular to Quebec.
Now, the next question, I'm going to preface this a little bit. You did watch Guy Rogers' documentary, so
yes,
he helped me formulate this question because he found it to, the way I'm going to phrase it, the visual tool that he used was a show of fingers. He found this to be very effective.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I saw that.
So I'm going to ask you, based on that, by a show of fingers, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being weakest, 10 being strongest, how strongly do you feel that the joys of living in Quebec outweigh the challenges?
Okay, so there's 5 and 2. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Norm. Now, we're coming to the end, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to express anything else you would like to say about your sense of identity or belonging in Quebec.
Okay. I grew up with a strong affinity for Quebec, for an understanding of what my Francophone compatriots were going through, what they wanted to see as the political and social reality, and how they had to fight for it very often. So I grew up with a strong empathy for that. As I said, in the past 10 years, that has eroded somewhat because of the measures of the current government. And that's not going to go away. So it does make life here in Quebec very challenging. Our 2 sons are both very successfully living with their families in Toronto and Hamilton, but they both grew up loving Quebec. They, and they're both bilingual, but they married young ladies from the Toronto area, and so consequently, that's where they have settled. But they share with my wife and I. They share a very strong affinity for Quebec. I'm not moving. I know that life here can be very challenging. And I understand that many of my Anglophone compatriots are very concerned about things like, as they get into their 70s and 80s, they're concerned about things like healthcare, for instance. And I think that's very understandable. My wife and I are not concerned about that, but at the same time, we understand their concern. But it is becoming increasingly difficult to sympathize with the aspirations of the Francophone majority in Quebec.
Norm, I really want to thank you for participating in this project. And what I'm going to do, Norm, is turn off the recording.
Sure.
You and I can just have a little chat off the record, which I'm looking forward to doing so. Just
okay. Sure.
Turn off the recording.